listening to Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
two certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only two best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go. Hi.
Hey.
Well, we aren't in the same room right now, so forgive any differences in the audio quality that you are accustomed to.
And that is my fault because I have a nasty cold, which you can probably hear in my incredibly nasally attractive voice right now.
I said,
so,
please
bear with me,
do
please.
not expose me to that.
No,
Stay
Rachel
away.
does not need this cold.
No, I dare say no one needs it.
I don't need it, but here we are.
But you got it. Sometimes you don't get what you want. You get what you need. Or what you don't need.
Or what you don't need.
Okay. So, hi, welcome to the first interview with a normal person in a really long time. If you're new to Clarity on Fire, or it's just been a really long time. Okay. If you haven't listened to our podcast in a year, I hazard a guess you haven't forgotten that we do interviews with normal people. But it is one of my favorite things that we do because I'm just really interested in talking to people who do not have necessarily any sort of public platform, who are not purported to be an expert around any particular topic, because I think that every single person is interesting, has a story to tell, has a journey that they've been on, has wisdom that they can share, and is an expert in their own life. And we can always learn from other people's experiences, good, bad, ugly, weird, whatever. So I love having these conversations with people that almost always people we've worked with in some capacity. And this is absolutely no exception. I haven't just like letting you in on how the sausage is made. Haven't actually had this conversation yet. At the time we're recording this, I'm having it tomorrow, but I know it's going to be great. I have no doubt, because I just love Mary so much. She's so smart. She's so interesting. She's very talented, and she's been on quite a journey. And I am planning on talking to her about literally every facet of it, and having a long and drawn out, if I get my way, conversation just about our feelings, her and my feelings about dating in your mid to late 30s too. In addition to just like life and career stuff, we're going to cover all of the bases in this conversation. So there is something for, I think, literally everyone here. So if something doesn't resonate, just wait, because later on in the conversation, very likely there will be something.
Okay, well, I'm going to jump in and read Mary's bio so we get a little context on who Mary is. Mary Cardenas is a writer, thriver, and recovering people pleaser. Between turns as a makeup artist and an assistant in LA's film and television industry, Major League Baseball, and higher education philanthropy, wow, that's like a very cool resume. Mary continued to find herself at odds with how she wanted to feel, and actually how she felt in each new role. A few months in, regardless of how different each landscape or location was, she was inevitably frustrated by each new job. Tired of not feeling like her most favorite version of herself all the time, Mary enrolled in coaching. With Rachel's guidance, her work-life balance, creative flow, and her authentic self all finally fell into alignment. Oh, yeah, I love a story like that, where it's like, clearly, I don't even know much about Mary's story yet, but one of those situations where it seems like doing really cool things on the outside to the external world, but doesn't necessarily always feel that way on the inside until you make some pretty big shifts. So I'm already intrigued.
She's a really good example of someone who's this is going to sound so corny, and I hate saying this because it makes me sound like a coach that you roll your eyes at. And I don't ever want to be someone that anyone rolls their eyes at. But she really
We like to call them
blossomed.
butterfly coaches.
I know. And I'm not a butterfly coach, but she really did blossom. I know. And it's just the truth is that
Sometimes
I saw
that's
her.
the best word.
I mean, I saw her go from really, just stressed to the max and having very little time or energy to enjoy her life, and just very miserably like at the effect of other people and feeling like she had not a lot of autonomy over her life or her time, to, again, this is what I love, is that she changed almost nothing. Like the job didn't really change that much. Like, yes, there were some changes that ended up helping, but she didn't like quit and pursue an entirely different career. Like she hasn't made, and we're going to talk about this, she almost made the most dramatic life change, like left her whole life in Montana and then was going to go to Europe for grad school and then decided not to. And we'll talk about how she made that like choice. But I just love someone who doesn't actually make that big or sweeping of changes on the outside, but then ends up blossoming. It's like, okay, well, we can only attribute that to what you did to yourself on the inside.
Yeah. And I feel like that makes it feel a lot more accessible and attainable for people who maybe they don't want to make a huge life change, or they can't because they have a lot of responsibilities, or they have kids, or they have a sick relative or something, and you can't just up and move to Europe. But that doesn't mean you can't change your life.
Yeah. And I would argue that like you should try to change it before you make a sweeping move to Europe.
Because you're still going to take yourself to Europe.
Yeah, exactly. So we will get into this more at the end, but reminder, and Mary is a really good example of someone who has been through the process of one-on-one coaching and has benefited from it and is a loud evangelist for coaching at this point, which I appreciate about her. That we announced it last week when we came back. Hello. By the way, if this is the first episode you're listening to, what's up? It's been a while. Go back and listen to our update episode if you want to hear about our lives over the last 7 months. But we are currently in the midst of a one-on-one coaching enrollment period, which is the time where, I say a few times a year, but this year I genuinely don't know when we're going to be doing it necessarily. We're doing it right now, and that's all I can tell you. I don't know when we're going to do it next. Where we take on a handful, and I mean like maybe 10, because we just have a limited amount of space and time and energy. We take on a handful of new clients. And so if you have been thinking about it, or if you listen to this story and it resonates with you, we would be delighted to talk to you about the possibility of working with us for some period of time. And we can talk more about the details and your questions and what fears or hangups you might have. And it's totally normal to have fears and hangups. You don't have to be totally sure that you want to do it. You just need to be serious enough that you want us to talk to you about it. In which case you can go to the link in our show notes, and you can read about, a little bit more of the details on that page and fill out the form. And then one of us will reach out to you to schedule an intro chat, or you can just go to clarityonfire.com/coaching if that's easier for you, and you can find the same stuff there. But we'll come back and remind you of that at the end.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of this conversation. But for now, let's hear from Mary.
Hey, Mary.
Hi, Rachel.
I have been excited about this all week. I'm not kidding. I haven't done one of these in 8 months or 7 months or however long it's been. And I'm excited because I miss doing this. And I'm really happy that it's you.
I'm so excited. Thank you. And I'm so excited to do this, which I'll be honest, after listening back to my very first call with you, being excited about doing something like this is not something I ever would have said.
I love that you prepared by listening to our first call. Okay.
I did first and last.
Oh my God, I love that. She did research for this media appearance that she's making right now. I love that. Okay. So I don't know why this is where I want to start, but it's kind of where I want to start. We did an episode. If I think to link to it after this in the show notes, I will. But we did an episode, while you and I were coaching. So probably a year and a half ago or so at this point. I think it was maybe summer of 2022, where it could have been even before that. I really don't know. Where I talked, not by name, but I talked about you, and I used you as an example of someone who was in a toxic situation and needed to sort of fight back against the system and how the job was making you feel, and was sort of inadvertently, not victim blaming here, but a little bit enabling some of your own suffering by things like not taking a lunch break. Like you had it when I met you, you were in a situation where you were working like nonstop. You never even stopped to take a lunch break, and you were miserable. And one of the things that we eventually obviously had to work on was you're allowed to take that time back, and you are actually allowed to set that boundary. And if you don't, you kind of enable the system to keep grinding you down and treating you like crap. And that was you. And to think that that was you, knowing you now, kind of boggles my mind.
Yeah, it boggles mine as well.
As someone who I believe still takes her lunch to this day.
Yes, 100%. Always.
Okay. So when you re-listened to our first call, what stood out to you about where you were and who you were?
By the end of it, I said something and I was like, I don't know, I guess it just kind of makes me scared. And you stopped me and you're like, so I'm getting that everything scares you, because I had said scared at that point, not even kidding, probably 13, 14 times. So I was scared to say I had too much of a workload for one person. So instead, I just kept working harder and longer, which was burning me out and all of these things. And that's just like the cycle that I was in. And it was the same way with, trying to put in time with personal life or all those other expectations outside of work. It was all the same thing. I was just scared to speak up for myself. And I was really enabling anybody to treat me that way.
Okay. So we're gonna get into that, obviously. But in your bio, you very succinctly said that you had this pattern of finding yourself at odds with how you wanted to feel every time you sort of ventured into a new job or a new industry. And you've had a lot of different turns, right? The makeup artist, working in the film industry, Major League Baseball, like you've done it all kind of, but everywhere you went, you had this clash between how you thought you would feel and how you wanted to feel and how you actually felt. So I kind of want to know how did you think you would feel and how did you actually feel, if you were to articulate that?
Yeah. So every time I took on one of these new opportunities, I had, and because they were also drastic, I had these expectations of what I thought my life was going to look like in that role. And I was totally fine with always starting from the bottom and working my way up, which is what I thought you had to do. But at a point, because I was an assistant in the industry in LA for so long, 7 years or 6 years, I guess, all of these things transfer. So I kept telling myself I had to start there at each new spot. And so everything would be new and exciting because it's all similar skill sets, but I'm starting over at a new place and you're meeting new people. It's a different, usually each one involved a move. So there was a location change, new people, you're learning the ropes, and everything seems so fresh and new and exciting. And then after a couple months, the same things keep happening in a support role. They realize that I am efficient and like good at what I do. So they give me more work. So my role in those scenarios kept getting bigger, but not my compensation, not my title. I was still a support person. So every time I thought I was going to grow in these places and it was going to feel good to take on something new, but it all stayed the same. And then after a few months, the workload would just grow and I would be tired and frustrated and realize I was doing the exact same job in just a different industry. But I don't think I actually realized that until I started talking to you or listening to a little bit of the pod. It was more that I just didn't know why I kept complaining to my best friends. And a couple of them had conversations with me and they're like, well, you just don't seem happy. Like you can make a change. But I looked at my track record and I'm like, well, where am I supposed to change to? Like, this is what I'm qualified for. And I think I talked about that a lot actually on our first call. I was like, this is the life I'm qualified for. So how am I supposed to find any enjoyment in it if I'm miserable being an assistant after 3 months at every new place I go to?
So it sounds like you had this expectation that when you changed industries or you changed jobs, like this will be the thing that finally enables me to break this pattern. And you were sorely disappointed every time you discovered that was not the case. And everyone treats me the same everywhere I go. And maybe finding out that you were the common denominator.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like scared, I guess. Yeah. One, to acknowledge that. And then two, how to ask for anything to change, or because I didn't think anything could change.
And that's why I think one of the reasons we resist owning that, like, I think this is me, or I must be contributing to this pattern in some way, because it's so much more scary and overwhelming and seemingly impossible, I think, from the outside to change yourself and whatever you might be doing to bring this on, rather than just blame it on the external situation and the boss, or, oh, it must just be the industry, because those are things that are, I mean, they're still difficult to change, but they're easier to change, it would seem, than changing myself. Or even, like, again, knowing where to start, because it's not like, I don't think at that time you had any clue about the root of how you were sort of contributing to this pattern.
Yeah. And there was another big moment right before I made the decision to fill out the web form for coaching. Was had been just casually seeing somebody, dating someone. And I was with my best friend and her husband, and he had texted me something like kind of rude about the plans we were trying to make. And my best friend was very like, oh, I don't like the way that he phrased that. That's rude. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. And like, I wasn't bummed out by what she said. I was bummed out that I didn't recognize that that wasn't great behavior. And then, like, once I put my phone away and stopped thinking about him for the night, and I went out to the concert with her and we had a great time. We had so much fun. And I was dancing around, smiling, having the best time. And her and her husband were like, why aren't you this person all the time? And that's why, like, literally on my questionnaire to you, I wrote, I just want to feel like my favorite version of myself all the time. And I just didn't really know how to get there, or why those flashes were just flashes. And we really had to, like, start from square one.
Yep. Okay. So you were a scaredy cat when we first met.
The biggest
scaredy cat, who kept repeating a pattern over and over and over again, hoping that it would just change magically without her having to do anything different, potentially. But then eventually she worked up the courage to do something different. And here we are. Okay. So, man, I don't know that it's possible to sum up, like, everything that needed to change and that you ended up changing. But do you want to give us your take on what was at the root of why you were sort of allowing people to take advantage of you, and why you found it so hard to put your foot down or to set boundaries or to say, hey, no, I can't do the job of two people. Hey, I actually do deserve to take a lunch break. That's probably a good place to start.
I had no, which just sounds ridiculous coming out of my mouth, but I had no idea I was a people pleaser. Like, I just didn't understand that that's what I was doing, because I was so, like, hyper vigilant from the time I was a kid of being, like, the one in the family that was the goofy, silly, creative, like almost like the mascot, because I was 7 and 8 years younger than my brother and sister. So I was just kind of used to playing that role in the family. And I just stayed that person because that it was easier than confrontation. So once you were immediately able to tell me I was a people pleaser. And when you pointed out that I was intolerant to vulnerability. And once I realized how scared I was of that stuff, and you and I started working through it, those were the things that really started to shift everything for me.
Okay, let's talk about vulnerability and tolerance. This is not the first time that I've talked about this on the podcast. I don't think you're the first person I've talked to about this in a normal person interview, but it's like at the root of so much of people pleasing. But honestly, it's just at the root of so much of our inability to connect with other people, to communicate, to feel our feelings, to be honest, is because we have this like real strong aversion to vulnerability. And that can mean the vulnerability of having a difficult conversation with someone. It can honestly just sometimes mean the vulnerability of sitting with a difficult emotion and like not trying to mask it or run away from it or whatever. Like that is so pervasive and it comes in so many different forms that I would love to hear like what was your version of vulnerability and tolerance?
I think I didn't realize how scared I was to try anything new. And like not even confrontation in a way of like having to be like aggressive or like in confrontational, like sort of fights or anything like that. But it came down to the point where I was scared of like making a decision on which restaurant to go to because I wanted everybody to be happy and I didn't want to have like the wrong opinion. I just was really not confident in myself. So I was just scared of everything.
So I feel like the older I get and the longer I've done this, the more this should come as a shock to nobody. I talked about it probably the entire time we podcasted in 2023, which was only half the year. But that entire time I was talking about good inside and I was talking about like reparenting yourself and understanding, your attachment style and understanding the childhood traumas that you have experienced, little big T, but also the little T traumas. Because if you don't understand the role that you played in childhood, if you don't understand the people who programmed your brain, which at the end of the day, our parents and like the people who are closest, the adults who are closest to us in childhood are literally responsible for programming our brains. If you do not understand those people, if you don't understand how your brain got programmed, then you're at a huge disadvantage because you can't see how that programming is literally still running your life and how you're often playing out the exact same scenarios in the exact same patterns. And you're playing the same role that you were when you were 7 or 8 with your boss, with your friends, with your romantic partner. So to get to the true root, you have to go back really far. And that is both scary and inconvenient. Because a lot of people would rather just, no, I just need to get another job. I just need to make more money. Please, you're welcome to do that. And I promise you, it's not going to heal the 7-year-old who wasn't really allowed to develop a sense of self because she was too busy trying to keep the peace in the family by being whoever everybody else needed her to be. Entertaining and, light and pleasant or whoever it is you needed to be. You were too busy doing that to actually develop a real sense of self. So no wonder you were afraid to try things and afraid to express yourself. If you don't know who you are, then who's even expressing herself?
Yeah, it was a really wild realization to get to and to like talk about those things that you go through when you're little and the tendencies that you just pick up from your family. My mom's super anxious and my dad's like a very focused, non-emotional workaholic. And it's like, I got both of those. I took on both of those traits on myself, which made it really hard to ask for what I need at work. So I just worked harder, assuming that that was going to be the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not.
I mean, I think, I don't know. Personally, I actually think it's empowering. I can understand why someone would think it's the opposite, but I think it's empowering to realize, oh, most of my patterns and behaviors, and like, especially the ones that are plaguing me and driving me nuts, are things I directly got modeled to me from the people who I was raised by. And this isn't personal. Like, I learned anxiety, I learned workaholism, and then I didn't know how else to function. And so I just kept doing that until I was in my mid to late 30s.
Yes. And then by that point, once you're scared of trying anything new, everything seems overwhelming to start over.
I know I've said this before, but it's my favorite analogy, or it's my favorite example. It's like the 40-Year-Old Virgin, the movie with Steve Carell. Like, it's not that big of a deal when you're 18, right? Like, everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
When you're 40, right? And you've gone that long, it becomes like this ginormous mega deal. And then it's harder and harder and harder to accomplish something that, like, really any 18-year-old or younger sometimes is doing. And that's exactly what vulnerability and tolerance can look like, is that something that should be, and you intellectually know it shouldn't be that big of a deal, like asking your boss to honor the fact that you need to take a lunch break. Like, you're entitled to that. That's not even something that's like a nice to have. It's something that you are actually owed as an employee, I think. Like, that
well,
becomes...
and the sad thing was nobody was telling me I had to work through lunch to get stuff done. I was doing this to myself.
You were doing it to yourself, because that's how strong the patterns and the programming can be. Okay, so when patterns and programming are that strong, and like, they're that strong for all of us. Like, I don't think you're not a special case. I know this because I've coached literally for 12 years now, and I've seen every kind of person you can imagine. And like, you're like completely on the bell curve in terms of like how intense or mild or whatever your experience was. I'm like, this is really normal what you went through. So like, your level of fear and your level of anxiety and your level of workaholism, other people might not be able to relate to, but I guarantee that they have their own version. They have something that is probably equally intense if they haven't done work on themselves yet, or if they haven't really explored those patterns. We've all got some level of baggage akin to what you were experiencing. So, yeah.
And so you told me that very early on, which made me feel actually so much better.
Yeah. I try to normalize it for everybody, because it's just not stuff that we talk about. I wish we did, but we don't go to work and, meet, Marsha in HR and talk about our childhood baggage and how it affects us at work that day. Like, we're just not doing that. So like, we have to be able to talk about it somewhere. So I like normalizing it in coaching as much as possible. But anyway, okay. So I think we need to talk about, like, when you have a strong people pleasing, strong anxiety, strong workaholism, and you're doing it to yourself, how do we change it? So from your perspective, how did you and I go about changing that? I just am curious to hear it from your point of view.
I feel like one of the first things we did was, did I literally have to keep like a tally of how many lunch breaks or breaks I took, I think? Yeah,
you did. And I had to like even hold you accountable for telling me that you took lunch. Yeah. Like, it was homework for you to take lunch breaks. So
that was a big one. I feel like once we figured all this out too, I think we went through, and I cannot remember the terminology that we used, but how to talk to my boss and tell her, it was a different boss at the time, but like how to ask for these things. And we practiced the scenarios and how to go through them so that I felt more prepared. it wasn't like a best case scenario situation, but we did practice and prep for that. And I did that homework so that I could go into it feeling like it wasn't brand new. And it was so helpful. And I think that's when it was to prep for me to be able to start working from home on those Wednesdays, because we were doing our calls on those days. And I didn't want to be stressed out and then try to go home and say I was just waiting for an appointment. And you saw the bigger picture where you're like, you can ask for a day because other people at your work are hybrid. And we just really had to work through all of these conversations and how they could go and understanding them from different perspectives. And that was huge.
I mean, honestly, what you're saying we did exposure therapy, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it was like exposure therapy to taking a lunch break. It was exposure therapy to difficult conversations. It was exposure therapy to boundary setting. And like, you had to do it because I was holding you accountable for it. You weren't going to let me down, which is good. Like and we worked you up to things that were more and more and more, I think, uncomfortable. I don't even know if at first I expected you to take a lunch break every day. I don't remember, but I doubt
you did it.
I doubt I did that because I sort of knew you wouldn't be able to do it at first because you were so intensely in this pattern and so afraid that the whole world was going to fall apart if you stopped working like all day, every day, that I was like, all right, can we start with maybe like 2 lunches a week or maybe 3 and then get you up to the point where you're proving to yourself that the world is not going to end and I will survive. I will be safe if I take a lunch break. That's what exposure therapy, I think, is. It's just proving to yourself and your body in a way that you will never be able to talk yourself into. You have to do it and show your body and your mind that you're safe. And I know it sounds well, who knows how it sounds to other people. I have other clients who will be nodding their head hearing this because they too have had to do exposure therapy on things that from the outside, if you don't understand it or relate to it, seem like, why the heck is that so terrifying to that person?
Right.
But we all have things that terrify us that other people don't understand. And this was just yours. So that's kind of what we did is we did exposure therapy. I also, and you can talk about this as little or as much as you want, but I also recall one of the big things that we focused on was like working on improving the dynamic between you and your family. Because you were working all day, again, nonstop. And then at night, you were very driven to always be calling and FaceTiming your family. And you were like, I really would like time to write, but I feel guilty not calling home and talking to my parents. They're going through, a difficult situation right now. Who am I to basically say, no, I'm going to carve out this time and take time away from my family who wants to see my face and wants to talk to me and probably brightens their day to talk to me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do that. And I'm going to take time away from them and I'm going to give it to myself. We had to work on that too. Do you want to comment on that at all?
I will. Because right before I moved and left, the Major League Baseball job to come to work at my alma mater, my mom, I think she got officially diagnosed with Parkinson's about like very soon after I moved. And it's a horrible, horrible disease. And she's just, her mental and her cognitive and physical health have declined super quick. And it was so scary. And we didn't know anybody that had had this before. So there was a level of both like love that I have for my mom and wanting to be present to brighten her day and try and help and do like the cognitive memory work with her on FaceTime and finding my way to still contribute to the family. And then there was also the layer of guilt that was, for as much as I love my mom, which is as big as the whole world, like literally the guilt was probably thicker than anything else because I didn't know how to set a boundary. And I felt like if I said, I'm going out with my friends, or I'm going to take this time to write because I'm starting a class or anything like that, they would get mad at me, be disappointed. And this is at the time I was 37, turning 38 when like all of this was happening. So just sadly too old to feel like that concerned with your parents being disappointed that you chose your adult life over an extra evening of being on FaceTime with them. Even though I know it was supportive and helpful for her, it wasn't good for me. And had she been fully cognitively aware of everything that was happening, she probably wouldn't have wanted me to do that either. But I felt so guilty, like getting through the guilt of all of that stuff to be able to start setting boundaries and a regular time to do a longer session as opposed to like a quick 5-minute, hey, just seeing how everybody's doing today. It was really, really hard for me, which doesn't surprise anybody that's listening now because of how I was behaving at work as well. It was, like you said, literally the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because it's clear that if you're going to do something, you have to do it full out and you have to commit to it 1,000%. And you can't underdo anything for fear that that's not going to be enough. And where it's just, this is such a pattern I've seen over and over again, is that like, I'm going to default to just overshooting it so far that there's literally no way that like anyone's going to be able to find criticism with me. Because if I'm giving it 120, 50%, then that will keep me safe from criticism or rejection or whatever. And so it's just, I'm safer if I overdo everything.
And it's interesting that you say that, because one of the things that I was doing at the time, I was trying like a activity tracker that one of my favorite authors would like showed her writing style and tracking style on Instagram. But it tracked like everything for me. It was tracking like all the different writing projects I was working on, exercising, like all of these different things. And you and I talked about it at one point, and it was like my way of proving to myself, look how hard I'm trying. And until you pointed out, you're literally setting yourself up for failure because there's no way you can continue that or hit those goals all the time. Of course I was like getting angry and frustrated and burnt out. Like even my own personal goals were insane because I was trying to prove all of that to myself, even though my family didn't know about my tracker. My boss didn't know about my tracker. I just like didn't know why I was doing that to myself.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So what do you think made you feel able to, or like to set the boundary with your parents in a very difficult situation and maybe allowed you to feel a little bit less guilty and more able to take time for yourself?
It was basically just between talking to you, and then once I realized how much it was affecting me in a negative way, there was that. And then I was having also these same conversations with my sister, who was giving a lot of her time at the same time. So we had each other. It was almost like her and I normalizing it to each other because we were going through the same thing. And then you normalizing my work behavior, people pleasing behavior that so many other people had, and that it can change, and it has changed because I was listening to all these interviews on the podcast. And once it actually seemed possible, and I realized I was more scared of saying the thing than the outcome of it, then I was able to be like, okay, if we could just do these times, then we can all plan on it. I don't have to worry about changing this or that, and it'll just be less stressful for people. Like I think I approached it that way with them, but it was having another way to normalize it and talk about it with my sister too, and being like, oh yeah, this is too much.
And I don't know. I mean, I hope that you would have talked to your sister no matter what, but I'm glad that, I don't know, maybe the work on vulnerability helped you to admit to your sister that this is hard, and that this isn't like, you're not having a good time. I don't know. I wonder if an earlier version of you wouldn't have even felt right complaining to her about how you were feeling.
Oh, I certainly would not have. Her and I have super open conversations now but like she's worked so hard at her job, which is stressful. She raises 2 amazing kids, takes care of her husband as well, like all of these things. So, and she was that summer off from her job. She was helping my mom every day with like her extra physical therapy and things like that, and going to the house. So I would have felt horrible at the time, having not understood what I was feeling and trying to say something, because I'm sure it would have come out wrong too. And then knowing how hard she was working and putting in the time, because she was in the same state, because I wasn't there. I had moved states. So I think everything shifted from venting about imbalances in family or imbalances at work to actually figuring out what it was that was bothering me by my work with you, and then putting things into action and actually starting to shift things. Otherwise, it was literally just always venting and then being drained by complaining and then going back into the same routine every day.
Yeah, venting is really draining because there's no action, right? Like, we need to vent and we can complain, and that's fine. That's healthy. But at a point, you then have to do something about it, or else it's becoming detrimental and toxic, and it will eat away at you. And that was probably happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
So
it was, which is why I signed up for coaching.
So this is actually a good illustration of like the process and how the flow of how peeling back these layers and going through the process of coaching works, is that for a while we have to focus on the programming. And okay, so who is this 7-year-old kid who felt like she had to be everything to everyone, and who learned to be anxious, and who learned to be a workaholic? And can we expose her to new ideas and new ways of doing things, and hold her accountable for making some difficult shifts and changes, and like teach you that you will live when you set boundaries, and that when you take lunch, and it will get easier and easier the more you do those things. At a point, even though it's not like poof, you're all of a sudden better and you're 100% healed and you don't have any fears anymore, it lessens significantly, and you get energetic bandwidth back because you're not so in fight or flight mode all of the time, that you can like rest and relax a little bit. And in that space, it then becomes easier to focus on, what do I want to do? Because I think you were so in survival mode every day that I know you had thoughts about like, what am I doing? This can't be right. There are other things I want to be doing, but like, it's really hard to have the energy to focus on it or do anything about it unless you work through some of that. And so we did. And then we actually had space to focus on it. So what did you decide you were going to explore once you had the space to actually focus on what you wanted to do?
So 2 things happened. Once I started asking for things to shift at work, and some things I was getting and some things I was not. I was still doing the job essentially of 2.5 people, 3 people. And so when those things, like the bigger things, weren't shifting, that's when I started thinking about, well, what else would I want to do with my life? Like, I've always wanted to be a writer. That's why I was down in the industry in LA, trying to figure those things out. But I had tried that and I got burnt out again. Who knows what life would have been like had I been aware of all of these things at 25, 27 when I moved down there. But I actually started researching different areas and careers of things that I thought would interest me or were writing adjacent. And so I was doing research interviews essentially with people, and kind of reporting back to you on what I would find out. So it was stuff in publishing, technical writing for different companies, things like that. But really everything always came back to just wanting to be a writer. And so I actually, after I went abroad for the first time that during our coaching time, and I went to Paris, Berlin, and all around Ireland. And when I stepped foot on the Trinity campus in Dublin, I made a joke to my friend that I was like, oh, I'm just going to go back and get my master's. And then that thought did not leave my mind. So I actually applied to get my master's in creative writing abroad. So from like the start of when I met you in May of 2022 to where I was scared to take a lunch break. By November or October of 2022, I was willing to sell half my things and apply to grad school, and had to, ask for letters of recommendations, filled out my applications, and applied to places in both Ireland and Scotland, and was super excited about it until I started filling out the applications.
So you got really far down that road. It wasn't like you were thinking about it. Like you said, you really went for it, and you like jumped through the hoops, and you were taking this really seriously.
Yeah.
And by all accounts, I was like, oh, well, this makes perfect sense. Like this is seems really aligned with her. And then you were like, I don't think I want to do this. And it actually takes a lot to surprise me, because typically I can see things coming for people. Like when I work with them, often I'll kind of have an inkling of where they're going to end up or go. Sometimes like before they realize it. And sometimes I don't tell them, because I'm like, it's not going to be valuable unless you kind of get there on your own. But that really took me by surprise. Like I did not see that one coming, that you changed your whole mind about that. But the realization you had around why this actually wasn't the right move for you was so good. And I think I need you to share it with other people, so that, if they're having like some big sweeping desire to change their whole life, sometimes that's the right move. Sometimes it is the right thing to like sell half your shit and like move to another country. And sometimes it's not. So tell me, why was it ultimately not the right move?
I have been writing since I was 13, and I feel fairly solid in what I've learned and these classes that I've been taking and all of these things. And I really wanted to be that writer overseas pursuing my dream. It all sounded like so magical and beautiful. But as I was filling out these applications and having to redo these critical essays and all these thematic papers on these novels, I had no time during that process to do my own writing, which I was super invested in. And it dawned on me that I would move to one of these stunning places and be so buried in schoolwork and writing the things that I needed to write for those classes, that all of these things that I was writing now that were when I'm happiest and like filling me up and like giving me my great evenings when I'm away from work are not the things that I would be doing during the day per se. So I would be more in a classroom and not exploring the places that I was considering moving to. Whereas really, I would like to take just 2 to 3 weeks off and get to go on a writing vacation and all these different beautiful places around the world, not be a student who uproots her entire life to start over again. That wasn't really what I wanted. What I wanted was the time to be creative. And there was still that old kind of like structural belief that to do something like that, it had to be part of a bigger institution or purpose. So I thought kind of, oh, well, if I go to school, I'm justifying it. And it's a creative writing degree I didn't have. I started out in film school and got my master's in screenwriting. But when I switched to writing novels, I just didn't have as much experience. So I thought, well, this will be my way into that. And this is how I'll go have that experience. But really, I allowed myself to go through the process, think about it, acknowledge how I was feeling as the stuff was coming up and what it meant to me. And then I realized I didn't want to be in a classroom anymore, like in that setting. I wanted to go travel and explore.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you said it quite like this, but you did say, I think, something along the lines of, I just realized like I don't have to go anywhere to get what I need. And that like maybe the challenge even is like staying here and getting what I need out of being here.
Yeah. And for a long time, I think too, because I've moved around so much, staying put anywhere for someone who relies so heavily on stability and structure, I didn't want to be that traditional. So I liked the fact that I wanted to be a writer and move around and do all these things. And like kids were never really part of a picture for me. So like a very traditional life, like I'll probably get married someday, I'm sure, but it wasn't super high on my list. So like this very traditional lifestyle wasn't one that I wanted. And so I thought staying put somewhere and putting down roots would be boring or a letdown. And once I just like took that first trip abroad and got a taste of it, I realized, like, because I am a thriver, like what a normal, stable job can do for you to afford to go on these adventures that's ended up being what I realized I wanted more. Like once I realized it was okay to stay put, it's not boring. You can still live a very exciting and fulfilling life by being in the same place. It changed my perspective on that and feeling like I had to do something big every time and start over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was like the first time, I think, in your life that you'd had that impulse to start over and move somewhere else and like start a whole different life, and then chose not to do it. And in doing that, I feel like you really did actually overhaul your entire life, even though from the outside, a lot of people would say it's not that different. Like you still are working with the same organization. Like your day job hasn't changed that much, I don't think, right?
It actually did change. I'm no longer an assistant, and they had created 2 roles, and one is a new one that I was promoted up into. So I'm on a completely different team, and it's a small team. So my work-life balance is even better than I had
great
now than what it was when you and I ended, which is great. But yeah, still doing similar things and still at the same place. And I ended up buying a house, which is nuts for someone who moves every 3 to 7 years.
Yep. And I feel like the staying put and the carving out more space for yourself with setting boundaries with work, with family, with then ending up in a position that affords you more work-life balance, really allowed you to do what you actually set out to do, which is to invest your time into your creative life. So, I mean, I would love to hear you tell people what life is like now and what you're focusing on now. And, you know, I mean, you've said in your bio, I really did get to the point where I became my most favorite version of myself. So I think people would be interested in knowing who that person is and why you are the most favorite version of yourself now.
So this was the fun part of going back and listening to my first and last call, because on my first call, everything scared me. And as you know, like wasn't taking lunches, any of those things. And then by the end of it, I was going out to see bands in town by myself. I signed up for a songwriting class that was in person. And I had to write and read out my lyrics every Monday for 6 weeks in class. And I wrote my first song and sang it with my teacher. And like, we put down the melodies and like all this stuff, mind-blowing things that I would never have done before, in my opinion, for myself. So I'm doing all sorts of fun things like that for my writing, signing up for a lot more classes, figuring out my next steps as far as like finishing the book I'm writing now and how I'm going to query literary agents and like which writer festivals I want to go to. I listened to a great writing podcast called The Shit Nobody Tells You About Writing. And they do a segment where you can submit your work and they will review your query letter in first 5 pages. And they accepted mine, and that came out in October. And I'll be honest, their reviews were like fine, but not great, which is useful because it made me better. But it was terrifying. So stressful to have your work put out there and reviewed for the public. But these are all the things that I'm willing to do and put myself out there for now that I never would have done before. And I factor in my writing time in such a different way. I'm starting a new class next week that's every Tuesday night for 10 weeks. And like I told my family weeks ago, I'm like, that these are the nights like I'll definitely be unavailable. Like we don't FaceTime as much as we used to. And my mom can't focus for that long anyways. But these are the things that I have no problem telling people, like they're important to me. And because they're important to me, they respect that. And it's important. That time is now important to them. Those are things that I wasn't comfortable saying before. And for things like work, like I was able just to tell my boss, hey, I need to take the afternoon off. Like things I never would have done before. So it's a life of more ease, I guess, too. Like I get to do all the things that are making me happy. I still have the stability that I need to feel like I can take care of myself. And I have so much more free time to do the things that I like. And I'm not spending my downtime like stressed out and overthinking. And my downtime is actually restful.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
So, yeah.
Wow. Who would have thunk that in avoiding everything that terrifies you, you end up having a very miserable existence where you're constantly stressed out, you're overworked, you're anxious. And in you being willing to expose yourself to all sorts of things that terrify you, setting boundaries, like, confronting things when they need confronting, exposing yourself to things that seem really vulnerable, like a songwriting class, for example, you now have a life where you feel way more at ease. Isn't that kind of weird that fear can lead to ease?
And honestly, it's just spread out like everywhere. It trickles into everything. So yes. I think by the end of our time on coaching calls together, I was still like pretty skittish about dating and dating apps and things. And there was a guy that I had met like right towards our time that I was really excited about.
I remember that one.
Yeah. I know. Coaching really wrapped up at the perfect time. I got to put a button on all of these fun stories with you. But I just remember being so nervous, like going out to have dinner with him the first time. And since like finishing this round of coaching with you and having put my fear aside or acknowledging it, like it's fine to be scared of things, but is it because I don't actually want to do something or am I just scared of doing it? Yeah. And once I got over that and just acknowledged when I was just scared of something and did it anyways, it changed dating for me. I go out on dates all the time now and it's not terrifying. It's not horrible at all.
I so appreciate the perfect segue into this topic because obviously, like I was really tempted to just have two separate conversations with you, like the one we just had and then dating. But I was like, whatever, let's just have a long conversation because I just think that, and first of all, for those of you who are not single or who don't think this is going to apply to you, I just have a strong feeling that just because we're talking about dating doesn't mean that the underlying themes and stuff isn't going to apply. So like, maybe stick with us on this. But especially if you're someone who is single or who's a woman in her 30s and is single and doesn't want to be or older, then maybe let's talk because you and I have really shared a lot and I think bonded over this because I think you and I have had very evolving takes on dating and dating apps. I am very similar to you in that I was terrified to date, to go out on dates. Absolutely abhorred the idea of dating apps. They triggered me so much when I was finally willing to even try them. Just logging in sent my nervous system into like absolute like DEFCON 1 or 5, whichever one's the highest, like spiral. And it was only through like exposure therapy and like actually having conversations and going out on dates and stuff that it became easier and easier and easier and easier for me to function. And it also really allowed me to work through some of my shit, some of my baggage, like some of my programming was only able to be worked through because I was willing to face that fear. And I now have a totally different perspective on dating and the apps and all of that than I once had. To the point where obviously, if you listen to our last episode, you learned that like, I met my boyfriend on Bumble, and I never, ever would have expected that. Like, never would have guessed that that would be the case. So I'm like, okay, well, I was wrong. And so I think it would be helpful for you and I to talk about what we were wrong about, and maybe how it goes counter to, I think, a lot of advice that people, especially women, are getting about dating and the apps in 2024.
Yeah. I don't know how other people approach it. But you and I ended up talking about, was it your 5 C's, 4 C's?
Five. The 5 C's of compatibility. Trademark.
By the end of our time together, to help me like be a little bit more discerning, because the apps can be overwhelming. It could feel like you have too much to choose from or not enough to choose from. In which case, like, once I spent a consistent amount of time on it and I didn't get frustrated or creeped out or whatever after a week and just delete them until I get bored, because I don't go out to bars very often. Like, I've aged out of that scene.
And
so there's
is
only
that
so
where
much.
you want to meet someone at this age? Like,
yeah, exactly.
personally, that's a hard pass from me. You know, like, if you're still going to bars at like almost 40, I don't know that I want to like have children with you. You know what I mean? That's like your regular haunt. That's not for me.
Yeah. Well, we learned from me dating bartenders that was not for me either.
Not for you either.
But the apps were just like such good practice. And I will say, I do live in a fairly small town, so I felt a bit safer on them. I could do like a bit of a background check, because the odds are that I knew somebody that knew somebody. So it did make me feel a little bit better. And I definitely went out with handfuls of guys that I did not know anybody. Like, they weren't connected to anyone. But it gave me more confidence when I went out, because it was less scary because of the exposure therapy of talking to new people all the time. I can be very sociable with my friends and their friends of friends that I'm starting to meet. So I just had to connect the dots with first dates and stop putting so much pressure on them. And then, two, it's like this thing of learning how to become more discerning. It's like, of course, I know what my core values are and what I would like somebody else to have and all of these things. But until you start to get to like meet new types of people or see what people are putting on their profile, I thought that once I narrowed things down, it would be almost more depressing. But it's really just me not wasting time on people that I already know aren't gonna like pick the personality or core value boxes. And I think sometimes people will just go on dates to go on dates because they're like, well, you just don't know. What if they surprise you? And I'm like, well, if they are, totally at odds with your core beliefs, right? That's listed on their page. Why would you
go
just to go? And I did do that early on, which is like, of course, those relationships didn't work out and those dates went poorly.
Yes. Okay. You can see that I want to, like, I think you can see on my face that I'm just like so revved up about this because, okay, I feel like I've seen a lot of hot takes. This could just be like TikTok, and I'm a millennial. I don't watch TikTok. I watch Instagram reels from, TikTok.
Yeah, we have to wait for them to come to us.
Absolutely.
I can't figure out the TikTok.
I'm not going to get on TikTok. That's a hard pass. But whatever. I've seen plenty of hot takes, and I understand why. I totally do. I'm empathetic to it, but encouraging people, women, usually encouraging other women to delete the dating apps and just stop dating and stop focusing on dating. And again, I totally understand where that's coming from. I don't think that's the wrong advice for everybody. But I think as a blanket statement, it doesn't work. And as someone who used to vehemently agree with that like you should not be on dating apps. Dating apps suck. The people on them are terrible. Like, they're the worst. You feel so demoralized and you get treated like garbage. And all of these things can be true. And absolutely, if you don't want to be on them, don't be on them. If you need to take a break from them because your mental health is suffering, absolutely take a break from them. And I'm pretty convinced at this point that the reason my experience on the dating apps was not terrible in comparison to the stories I hear from other people is because I used them differently than how other people were using them. Like, you're correct. I never went out with someone whose core values were clearly opposed to mine without me even needing to like get further information, like either because it was clear on their profile or because I made sure to have like an in-depth conversation with them and glean, how as much as possible in that conversation, glean how aligned are we? And if there's something that comes up that's just like clearly a deal breaker for me, why am I going to entertain that? Also, if someone was not, for example, very communicative, like if I had to carry the entire conversation, I was not going to then go out with that person. And like, there's plenty of guys on the apps who like literally never ask you a single question about yourself and like just let you basically ask them stuff and then never reciprocate, who then will ask you out on a date. And you're like, why would I do that? Why would I go out with you? But then people go out with those guys and then they come to TikTok and they complain about how bad dating is. And I'm like, girl, to a point, you just did that to yourself.
Yeah.
And so like, are dating apps and is the experience of it difficult? Absolutely. Is life difficult? Also, yes. So like, do you think like dating is just a subset of life? Like life is always going to serve you up shit. So like, why do we expect it to be perfect? Why can't we maybe use our discernment as best as we can and take breaks when we need to, but also see it as an arena in which you can really practice and heal a lot of stuff that you really can't unless you have that direct exposure to the thing that scares you. And it also teaches you so much about what you want, and it affirms so much about what you value in a partner and what's not going to work for you that you can't necessarily figure out by just thinking about it. And I'm like, man, I don't know that I would have gotten where I am now and been able to so quickly decipher, like, am I aligned with this person who I'm now in a relationship with, if I hadn't had a couple years worth of off and on dating app practice. So like, delete the apps? I don't know. Maybe not.
And I do think that there's different levels of intensity that you can approach these things at too. So there are people that I've known that that's their thing that they need to look at. They're constantly on it. It's like their second job.
Not
and
healthy.
if you put that much energy into it, it builds up those expectations and the stress around it. Whereas it is just another tool for me to meet new people. Yeah. Like I've met people out in the real world through friends, through my hairdresser. Like it literally, like people just be like, want to introduce you to people, the more that also you're open and honest and talking about these things with people. They will then connect you with people if they happen to know someone. And I think a lot of people feel weird openly talking about that. And there's nothing wrong with telling people, oh yeah, I'm looking to date. Like I'm getting back out there, all of these things. Some people feel embarrassed by that. I see people that I know all the time in a small town on dating apps. And I know some people feel mortified by that, but I'm like, why? There's nothing wrong with being single. It's not embarrassing. It's a tool to meet people because we're all so kind of like separate and scattered. And when you do go out to a restaurant, like how often are people approaching you? Like I've had one person in the last year that's come up to me and they were pretty much exactly the same as the last person that I was talking to you about when our coaching calls ended. And he was somebody I met on an app. They're all still the same people. It's just how you are allowing them to communicate with you. And like you said, like once you figure out what you want and how you're going to handle yourself in any scenario, it's no different than how you interact with somebody you met randomly at a coffee shop or a bookstore or a restaurant. You're still just getting to know somebody from scratch.
So to tie this back to like the kind of thread that this conversation has going, which is about fear and vulnerability and exposing yourself to those things in order to like have the life you actually want. I have a friend, I don't think she'll mind me using her as an example. I won't name her by name, but she's in her 30s and she's been dating a guy for a couple of months. And I was really surprised when she told me that she had not broached certain conversations with him yet. That like and I know her, like she's more traditional, like she wants to get married, she wants to have kids. She's not positive whether he wants those things. And they've been dating for like 2 months. And obviously, you know me, I am itching to call this man on her behalf and interview him and be like, what do you want? Because I had to sort of like rein it in with her when I was out to lunch with her. I had to rein it in and not be like, are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Because what I wanted to say was like, why don't you know that before you even go out with him for the first time? Like that is such a core aspect of compatibility that you should not waste a single minute even going out with someone unless you can get clarity around core things. Like there are certain things you might learn over time and that's fine. Like that's what dating is for, is to get to know someone, get to know how they think, get to know their beliefs about certain things. You can't learn it all in a day. You have to have conversations. You have to have experiences with that person. That's fine. But there are probably a handful of things that literally make it completely useless to even go out with them. And that's one of them. If you want to get married and they don't, if you want to have kids and they don't, you do not spend 2 months with someone as a woman in your 30s, unless you know that they also want those things eventually, and maybe even want them on a similar timeline to you, because that's one of the aspects of compatibility is chronology. Do we want it on a similar timeline, right?
It's one of the C's.
So it's like, and she's terrified to have this conversation with him. And I'm like, okay, so we can't say that dating is awful and that things don't work out if we're also terrified to have basic ass conversations about what we need, like, and what you desire. Like, if someone can't handle you asking, and actually, this is one of the things that I think I mentioned this in our last episode, that, like, I had got in trouble, quote unquote, with men on dating apps for being too much of an interviewer at the beginning. Like, just asking questions like that, like, or just being honest about what I was looking for. And like, just so you know, you seem great, but this is what I'm looking for. And if that's not what you're looking for, I definitely don't want to waste more of your time talking. And they would sometimes get affronted. And like, I got told by one guy that I was like a little bit too much of like a business lady around dating. Literally use that phrase. And yet, like when I met my current boyfriend, he was doing that to me and I was doing that to him. And we were both like, thank God, like someone who is sane and who like isn't wasting, you know, the other person's time, and we're on the same page. So again, is dating awful? Can it be awful? Yes. Are we making it more awful than it needs to be because we are afraid and we are not willing to advocate for our core needs and what, you know, like compatibility means for us? Also, yes.
Yeah. And when all of those things clicked for me and I started paying more attention to that and made sure that my own profile was as clear.
Yep.
Especially about the kid thing, because I just don't want kids. And that rules out a lot of options for me, because most dudes on these apps say they want children. So I don't even attempt to match with them. Why would I?
Why would you?
I'm not 25 years old anymore. Like my opinion's not going to change on that.
Right.
So I've been able to narrow down what I want, and that makes me feel so much more confident and at ease around all that. I was having a conversation with a friend, and she was like, and even if it takes longer, and she's like, don't be bummed out. And I'm like, I don't really look at it as taking longer because I'm not investing these negative experiences or this time suck in people that I certainly know I'm not going to go down that path with them. So I'm continuing to live my life in my normal way where I'm very happy and doing all the things that make me happy with my friends and all of these things. And then the app is a tool to meet people. And if somebody fits into that, I will go out on a date with them, and that's it. And then it's easy. But if you try to, force the square peg into the round hole, it's going to lead to nothing but frustration.
And why do we try to, fit square pegs into round holes? It's for the same reason that you learned at 7 or 8 to try to be everything to everyone in your household, right? Like, just be who these people need me to be in order to keep them happy. And if you haven't changed a pattern like that, you're going to do it to every man you meet on a dating app, which is why you are willing to go out with men who do not share your core values and who want things that are different than you, or why you might be afraid. I've seen this happen so many times where people are legitimately afraid to like change the parameters on their dating apps to exclude people with whom they literally don't have like anything in common, right? Like excluding men who want children. You're like, well, I don't want that. So, but some people are literally afraid to do that because they're like, well, what if I miss out on someone? Like, how is someone who you don't share a core value with your person? And how could you possibly miss the boat on the right person if you just say what you want? Like, you're going to get that much closer to the kind of person you want if you're willing to be really vocal and unapologetic about what you're looking for and just say it out loud.
Yeah. So I do think that they are tricky, the dating apps. Like, you have to put like a lot of trust into like meeting strangers and new people. But again, not any different than meeting a stranger for the first time at a bar or a restaurant or a bookshop or whatever it is.
More about them on dating apps. Like, that's one of the things I had to come to peace with, right?
Yeah.
I don't get to see someone's bio.
Pre-screen.
Right. I don't get to see someone's bio because they came up to me at a restaurant or a bar. Like, I don't know anything about that person. I know way more about someone if I match with them because I swiped right on them, because I read their bio and I so far liked what I saw.
Yeah. So I think that there is nothing wrong with them. I think sometimes it's really, it can be disheartening where somebody finally might like check your pre-screen list of things that like would make sense for a potential future, and then they can't carry a conversation or don't ask you one question, or it immediately they take it towards like too much drinking or like weird reference, like sexual references or anything like that, where you're like, all right, well, that was a disappointment. That one's done. Like those things will of course still happen. But it's like limiting your expectations around that. Like, just because you match with somebody does not, like, I watched a lot of friends I witnessed a lot of friends go through like but we were messaging and he seemed so great and I really thought there was something there, but they hadn't even like gone out yet or anything like that. And they're mourning the potential of the thing that didn't have. And so it's like just really allowing it to be like, you don't know this person yet. It's just you're getting to know them. Like, try to limit those daydreams about what it could be, because you don't know them.
Hard. It's so hard. Allison Armstrong, who I personally love as an expert on men and women and dating and relationships and all of that, says that, like, just by virtue of how we're wired as women, that when we have a man's number, basically we feel like we're in a relationship with him. And it's like really hard to like deprogram that from your brain, because it's happening on this like biological chemical level, that like when you have this like connection with someone, it feels like you have a relationship. And to a point, that's actually true. There is a relationship. It's not necessarily a romantic committed partnership, but there is now a relationship between you and this other person. And that men are much better at compartmentalizing that this is just a person from the internet who I'm having a conversation with. And they're better at not inflating it necessarily. Now that might be generalizing to a degree, but personally, I found that for myself to be completely accurate, that it was like, I had to work through that. Like when I matched with someone or when I was texting with someone, it felt like, oh, I'm in a relationship with this person kind of. And it's like, no, this is just a rando from the internet that you're having a chat with. You might not know him in 3 days.
Yeah. Yes. And once you practice saying that I say it to myself, I say it to friends that are dating. It's now so normal that I'm like, oh, wait, I am allowed to also keep dating other people.
Yeah.
And it's not, a dinner is not a contract for marriage.
No.
So taking the pressure, I truly just like taking the pressure off of apps and using them as another tool to meet new people has just been a better experience for me, as opposed to thinking it was the only way I was going to meet somebody, or I had to go out all the time. It's like trying to put 100% into either direction. It's just really not how it works.
Yeah. It's just a door that you're propping open. And if someone wants to walk through it, they can, but that's it.
Yeah.
And there's other doors that someone could walk through as well.
But we live in weird times where people are just kind of scattered and all over the place and do their own things. And it's still very common. So I have no problem like keeping mine open, and I don't delete them. I certainly paused them, like, especially when I travel and gone to a big city, because it is very stressful to leave them open and then go back to your page and be like, oh my God, what happened?
It's a lot.
Too many people.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, it can be flattering, I guess, that many people are interested in you when you go to a new city, but also like, oh my God.
So it was a bit much.
Yeah.
A bit much. But yeah, I think it's just a good, useful tool if you learn how to manage your expectations and really speak honestly to yourself and the people that you're meeting.
Yes. If you do not know what you want and you have not worked through your 5 C's of compatibility, I'm like, don't get on a dating app. Should I remind them real quick before we wrap up what the 5 C's are so that they can discern this for themselves? Okay. In no particular order, we've got character traits, which is just your personality. I think introversion and extroversion is a great example of something that falls into that category. Like, your sense of humor, your quirkiness, that's a character trait. Your core values. This is so important. Like things like your values around children, around family, around money, around career. If those don't align with someone, you're going to you can't really build a life with them if you have very different ideas of those core things. Chemistry, obviously, we have to find someone attractive and they have to find us attractive. And that's that. We've got chronology, which is, do we want the same things on the same time frame? And to me, this is like probably the thing that we don't pay enough attention to, because we can meet someone who we have all of the other things with, but if it's really mismatched around the expectations around like when we might, I don't know, move in together, or when we might get married, or when we might have children, then that's going to cause an incredible amount of friction. And just because you have a lot of the other things in common doesn't mean that that's going to ultimately work out. So you have to talk about timing. Why am I blanking on the 5th one? This is really annoying, Mary. Can we figure it out?
I had my notebook.
Oh my gosh. I hope you can find it.
Oh, here it is. Common interests. It's because it's technically kind of the least important.
Because it's least important and I don't care about it. Yeah, that's like, well, we both like skiing. Well, that's cool. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have any common interests with someone. And that sometimes if someone has an interest you don't share at all, it can absolutely become like a value clash, I think. Like if someone is a really big outdoorsman and they want to spend all of their time on the weekends doing that, and you are an introverted homebody who just wants to read and watch Outlander, like we might have a problem. Right. So like it's important to share some common interests, and all of these things overlap. Obviously, they're like the Olympic rings, I think, in terms of the Venn diagram. But There you go. So if you don't know that about yourself, and if you are on dating apps and your dating profile is not in some way, shape, or form, either in your bio or how you're answering your questions or whatever, reflective of most of those things, if you can't like try to create a picture of what you're looking for and what your expectations are around some of those 5 C's in your dating app, then I feel like you're doing yourself a disservice.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one's going to learn anything about you based on like what what do you like to eat for brunch? I like to eat avocado toast. Bitch, it doesn't tell me anything about you. Like use that real estate wisely if you're on a dating app.
Yeah, it's so true. I live at a very outdoorsy place and there's a lot of extreme outdoorsmen here. So I make it very clear that I am a summer person that enjoys hiking. I don't know how to do winter sports. I was like, I'm willing to like try and learn new things, but guess what? I'm not going to be somebody that's out in the backcountry with you going on camping ski adventures. It doesn't suit my skill sets
or your interest level.
And if that is, and if it's your life, that's obviously not going to work because we would never see each other. Yeah. So those are all very important things. And we figured that out towards the end of coaching.
Yeah, we did. Okay. Well, I could talk to you forever. And this has been an incredibly long conversation. I don't regret a minute of it. Thank you so much for having such a long conversation about your entire life and every facet of it. I hope that people got something out of it. It's almost impossible that they did not. And I would dare say if you listen to this and got nothing out of it, well, listen to it again, because I think you just zoned out during an important part.
I am so thankful that I did coaching, and I will always thank my friend Susie, who you know. I will never forget it because she sent me, she goes, don't take this the wrong way, but I feel like you should listen to this podcast. It's called Forever Alone, and I think you'll really like it. And that was my way in to finding you and Clarity on Fire, was starting to listen to that because she was like, I think you're going to identify with this. And it was the best decision I've ever made. And it has completely changed the last 2 years of my life.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Couldn't be happier.
I'm so glad that she sent you my way, because what fun it was to work with you and to watch your journey unfold and to keep watching it unfold from afar.
Yeah.
So thank you. I really can't wait to hear how people respond to this episode. And I will talk to you later.
Okay. Thanks, Rachel.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. I hope you guys enjoyed that. What I believe to have been a really long conversation with Mary. If you end up with a 2-hour podcast, so be it. Enjoy. Okay. So as a reminder, if you're thinking or like curious about or genuinely like, I want to blossom, LOL. I apologize. But sometimes it's just the visual we need. Let's talk, because why am I so corny today? I don't know.
You're usually not in a corny mood. This is out of character.
I'm not ever corny. I don't understand what's happening. Whatever. I'm like, I just want you to be happy. Whoever you're listening
that's corny.
to.
I think that's just true. I feel like if you're a coach, your ultimate goal is not, I just want my people to be happy. You're in the wrong business.
I just feel like I sound like a parent who you've just told something to that you've been kind of afraid to tell your parents because you're afraid they might judge you. And they're just like, I just want you to be happy. But that is truly what I want for you guys too. And that brings us to like a whole other conversation that I don't think we need to have right now about like, well, what does being happy even mean? What I don't mean by that is I think your life should always be easy, comfortable, that everything's always going to go well, that I don't want you to fall into the trap that I have fallen into, that Kristen has fallen into, that we've had to sort of claw our way out of thinking that when I get this thing, then I will be content and all of my problems will be solved. And whether that thing is a relationship, whether that thing is a job, I have done that. I have lived in this like magical thinking place of, oh, I'm going to blame all of my existential angst and all of the ups and downs of being human on the fact that I don't like my job. And so if I just get another job, then I can magically cure my human experience, which that's not the case. That can't be done. So what can be done is you can become someone who's really well adjusted, who has worked through a certain degree of their baggage, has released a lot of blocks and traumas and patterns and crap that's keeping you from being able to enjoy your life, to be able to like, that might be keeping you from, I don't know, being able to tolerate the ups and downs and the waves that life will throw at you. That might be preventing you from just like appreciating good stuff, even amidst chaos, because chaos will always come at you eventually. That's what I want. Because I think happy people are generally people who are pretty content with what they have and also have a reasonable expectation of life. That like, they're not looking for life to always be perfect, and they don't think they need life to be perfect in order to be content.
That's true. And the other way that we are very similar to that parent who just wants you to be happy is that what I don't really, ultimately, this is going to sound bad, but you'll get it. I don't really care what makes you happy.
I don't care how you get there.
I don't care what that ultimately looks like. I don't have any preconceived notions about what you should or shouldn't want or what's going to be best for you. That's what we uncover through the process of coaching. So if you don't know those answers, I don't profess to know those answers for you, but I do know the process to go through together to help you clarify what your version of happy even is. So not only is it not a destination, because you're not going to find the thing that delivers you happiness. That's not what I'm talking about here. But you are going to have to make some changes, and they might be internal, they might be external. They're probably going to be both, in order to get you to a place where your set point is happy. And sometimes you vary from it, but your average everyday set point is content, happy, fulfilled. Things are good. And then you have bad days, of course, and things come and life will throw you curveballs. You have to navigate those challenges. But you go back to that set point. When your set point is dissatisfied, then the low points are way harder to process. And the high points, you can't even really enjoy because you know they're fleeting and you're going to go right back to dissatisfied. So our goal as coaches is to help you get your house temperature, let's get your house temperature to a really comfortable place. And then there's going to be fluctuations throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the year. And whatever, we have to figure out what your set point is. And it's not going to be the same as everybody else's, and that's okay.
Yep. And that's actually a pretty good description, I think, of like the ultimate goal is I just want you to have a good set point. And whether we're focused on your career as sort of like the context through which we're exploring, what is your set point? What's getting in the way of you being able to like raise it or whatever? That's fine. It could be relationship stuff. It could just be like some people at this point come to me for coaching and they're just like, I don't know, I kind of like my job, and I'm pretty happy in my relationship, but like, I don't know, I just feel like blah. That's fine too.
Yeah. Even if you can't pinpoint what it is that's causing your set point to be a bit lower than you would want, that's okay. You don't even have to. You don't have to be able to name what it is. All we need to know is that your set point is lower than you want it to be.
Right.
And
that's all I need to know.
We know how to help you up it. That's the process of coaching.
I don't need to know almost anything. Like I don't because there's a process. This is how it works. And you would think at this point that I've gotten bored of that process, because it is that we take people, everybody who's new to coaching, we take them through the same steps, the same process. We have like a similar pattern of homework and conversations that we lead people through. So that you don't have to think about what you're supposed to talk about that day. You just show up and you trust, like, they've been doing this for almost 12 years now. They must have some idea of what they're doing. And they've got, hundreds and thousands of people who have gone before me. So like, I don't really have to think. I can just show up and trust the process. And you'd think I would get bored. And I'm not, because everyone's experience is slightly different. And there is also something satisfying about being able to know what has worked for other people and then helping you kind of like tweak it and modify it for yourself. And, seeing you apply things that have worked for other people, that's fun and interesting and satisfying.
Because Rachel and I don't know where the process is going to lead each of it's kind of fun. It's like I'm invested in your story. Where this is going to lead. Yeah. What's going to happen next for you. So I know the process, but I don't know each individual outcome. I know it's going to be a higher set point than where we started, but I don't know what it's going to look like. And so that process of revealing what your better feeling life looks like is always interesting. So I agree. I never get bored of the process, even though I know the steps like the back of my hand, right? Like I could have some of these conversations, like they can feel similar, but they're not that they're similar because no two people are that similar.
So anyway, all of that is to say, I would prefer, if you're interested in coaching, I would prefer your goal be not necessarily, I just need a new job by the next 4 months. I mean, I'm totally okay if that's an intention you have and that's something you really desire. I'm absolutely understanding of that. And I would prefer your goal be deeper than that, personally, for my sake, but also more so for yours. Because again, I want you to be happy. So I kind of know that your goal needs to be better than that. Your goal needs to be, I want to be able to feel fulfillment. I want to be able to like squeeze out every ounce of joy out of my life. I want to feel, like Mary said in her intro, like the most favorite version of myself. Those are better goals because they don't necessarily rely on you having to change anything on the outside or for a circumstance having to evolve or shift in order for it to happen. And then once you do that work, I'm telling you, it will be easier for the thing that you want to happen. Whatever you want.
And the steps to take to get to that better feeling place will become clearer as well. So you don't have to know what that's going to look like now. You may come in thinking it's a new job and it may or may not be. And if it is, great, we'll work on that. If it's not, okay, we'll work on whatever it is going to be that's going to get you there. So you don't have to know a whole lot coming into coaching, to be honest. You don't have to know exactly what's wrong. You don't have to know what you want necessarily. No. We're going to help you figure all of that out.
And another thing I'll say, maybe the last thing I'll say, you're not going to stump me.
I love when people think they can. No. It always happens. Somebody's like, I don't know. I don't think you can help me. I'm like, well,
I'm like, first of all, that's why I have the intro conversation with you, is to make sure that like what you need is a fit for what we do. And if I tell you, I think it is, then that's me saying, you're not going to stump me. Now, absolutely, every once in a long while, there are people who come to us who I'm like, I think you need something different than what we have to offer. And then I'll send you on your way to somewhere else because I'm not confident that whatever it is your situation is or whatever it is you need, that this is the best fit. Which is why I like to have these conversations, because I'm not just trying to work with whoever wants to work with us. I need to make sure it's really going to be in your best interest and ours to do that together. But if I have a conversation with you and I go, oh yeah, totally, your situation is definitely a fit for the process that we take people through, that's Kristen and I saying, you can't stump us with your problems. I promise. I know you think they're unique. They're not. I've heard them a million times in slightly different fashion. And that should be, I hope, a relief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, coaching is not the only modality out there. So if there is another modality that we think is going to be a much better fit for what you're needing, we will tell you that. We are always going to be honest. We are not here to just like take people's money and not help them. That is not our goal. And also, we're working together for a long time. Like, we want to make sure we are a good fit in all the ways, and that this is going to really be worthwhile for you and for us to pour our energy into over the next several months. So yeah, as long as we're like, yeah, this is like, I can handle this. I've seen it before, seen a version of this before. I promise we can work through this. You can trust us on that one. We've pretty much seen it all at this point.
We're old veterans of the coaching experience. Emphasis on old. Okay, so if you would like to talk to us about it, again, go to the link in the show notes, or you can just go to clarityonfire.com/coaching. Technically, we are doing this coaching enrollment period for 2 weeks, so a week has already passed. I'm positive we do not have all 10 of those spots that we said last week available. I just don't know how many because we record these in advance. But that just means that time is of the essence. And if this is something you want to do, then like, you got to let us know, and we got to schedule a call with you and just talk it out, and then see where we're at after that.
Yeah, we're planning to keep enrollment open for another week. But at the end of the day, it really does come down to bandwidth, our bandwidth, and we have only so many spots available. So,
and if
sooner
you're
rather
hearing
than
this
later,
at some
just
point,
so that we don't run out.
Yeah. If you're hearing this at some point after the coaching enrollment period ends, by the way, and you are like, man, I really wish I had found them during that, just either go to the same page, clarityonfire.com/coaching. There will be a different kind of form there that you can fill out to let us know you're interested. Or you can also, if you really want to, just email us, contact@clarityonfire.com, and ask what our availability is. Because as the year ebbs and flows, who knows where we're going to be at. So don't let that stop you. If later on you hear this and you want to talk to us, well, there's no harm in reaching out. Just don't know what we can promise you at that time.
Yeah, whenever we hit our bandwidth, we do have a wait list. So if you reach out, we might be able to tell you, not right now, but maybe in a month or two. So we'll let you know. So don't let that stop you from reaching out to us. Just know that the timing might be a little different, but we'll let you know at the time. But for those of you who are listening as this is coming out and you're really interested, I would jump on that sooner rather than later, because I don't know how quickly we're going to run out of these.
Yeah. Okay. So that's that. This is long, but worthwhile, all of it. And we will be back next Friday with something I'm sure a lot of you probably missed in the 7 months since you've gotten one. We will do a little message from the universe next time.
Oh, I love doing those. It's time. It's definitely, It's past time. So we'll see you next week.
All right. Bye.